And good afternoon. I'm a little late today, but I've been very busy. Anyway, as normal, we'll wait a few minutes to see whether the latecomers are coming. And if you are out there, do say hello. It's always nice to see you. And there's James from White Oak, PA, saying hello first. You win. You win the brownie point. William, you're a little bit late from Delmont. But anyway, nice to see you all. David, hello there from the UK. It's a very fascinating subject today, indeed, and I hope I can do it justice. But as I'll explain when I get to it. But good to see you there. Hello, Ken. Welcome, Grace. A dull and overcast evening in Dublin. That's a shame. Imagine it being dull, overcast, and possibly raining in Ireland. Did you ever hear of such a thing? Anyway, nice you're with us. Hello, Shelley. It's actually a good. There's Fitz Jamie one again. Hello. I know you're in Massachusetts at the moment. Here in Pittsburgh, for those who care, it is a beautiful sunny day. And yesterday was a beautiful sunny day. And tomorrow will be a beautiful sunny day. And then we may get thunder and lightning and rain again, because we've had a fair bit of that. Don't quote me on this, but I have a very strange feeling the climate is changing. But anyway, yes, as usual, let us say a very, very sincere thank you to the Allegheny Foundation, who have sponsored a whole year of webinars. Without them, we'd be asking you to sponsor, but we don't have to because Allegheny Foundation have done it for us. You can, of course, always make a donation. Every dollar counts, whether it's a dollar, whether it's a euro, whatever your currency is, wherever part of the world you're watching, every donation counts. And so please feel free to donate. Go to the website, push on the donate button, and it'll show you how to do it. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that's terribly easy. Same thing, go to the website. We're constantly updating the website, and in fact, we'll be doing a lot more work on that over the summer. But you can very easily get to our YouTube channel on the website and become a subscriber. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help us to have as many subscribers as possible. And those of you who understand the weird and wacky world of YouTube will understand exactly what I mean. So please do become a subscriber and invite your friends to subscribe. Hello, Dennis from Greensburg. Welcome back. Good to see you there. And also you can, while you're on that YouTube channel, catch up with all the webinars that you missed, because every one of them is there. And also, if you did miss Bloomsday or any part of the Bloomsday, that's all there on the on the YouTube channel as well. I hope those of you who were tuned in for Bloomsday enjoyed it. It's going to become a regular aspect of what we do. Hello, James. And we'll be doing it again next year. And each year we're going to do it hopefully in a slightly different way. If you missed it, or if you missed any part of it, it is on the YouTube channel. And for those of you who very kindly sent a donation on that day, thank you so much. As I said, all the Bloomsday donations that we received were actually shared amongst the artists. We gave them all a basic salary, but everybody actually got more than double their salary, thanks to the generosity of your donations. They give a fair bit of time preparing for it because, as you can imagine, it's not the easiest read in the world for an actor, and especially live. Those of you who spotted me will have noticed I had a problem separating 2 pages of script. So it's hard work, and we were thrilled that we were able to double the money that we paid them, because they do it mostly for love. The money is not huge. Thank you for your donations. And as I say, all donations every time are really, really welcome. Every donation counts. I'll be talking a bit more about that later, because we're now moving rapidly towards the end of this artistic year and the beginning of the next artistic year. More about that later. Hello, Margaret. Welcome. So, how are we doing? We can still give a minute or two for the latecomers and people still parking their cars. What other news do I have for you? Not a lot. But we have big plans coming up for the future, and more about that again in a week or so. This week is an interesting thing. Normally, when we do a series of talks on something, it's week by week by week by week. But I'm doing this as what I've described as an occasional series about something that I'm always, not always, but often being asked about, this particular topic. And in the past, I've always said, yeah, there are, I'm not quite sure. But I've been going back and rereading stuff that I read years ago and honing myself up on it. So now we're going to begin this cycle of talks on the Mysterious Seven. I chose that title for the program or for the series, obviously because it's a little sideswipe at the Magnificent Seven, which is in fact one of the perfect examples of what we're going to talk about. And it now being nearly 2:05, I think we'll make a start. If I ramble, forgive me, but it is that slightly complex sort of theme that we're talking about today. And let me begin by saying, as I have so frequently said before, everything I tell you may be wrong. It's just my view, my opinion, my objective view, and my subjective view on the particular topic. But it is a topic that is so fundamental to the art form that we practice in theatre that it warrants and indeed merits some point, some form of discussion or conversation. So often we have to explain, as directors, we have to explain to actors, as actors, we have to explain to each other and to audiences through our work the very topic on which I'm going to speak and what it represents. And we don't do it analytically, we do it through the performance, through the interpretation, through the work. But fundamentally, it is this wonderful principle that in art, in literature, in drama, there are 7 basic plots. And what are they? Well, I'm actually going to tell you in a moment. But before I tell you, I'm going to posit the question, what is a plot? What does it actually mean? What does that word plot mean? Well, to begin with, the plot is the essential framework on which a story hangs. Multitude of stories, but every story has a framework. It has a kind of scaffolding upon which it hangs. The plot is the process as well by which the story is told. There's a kind of methodology to the telling of a story. And the plot is also the purpose for which the story is told. Some stories are told to make you happy, some stories are told to make you sad, some stories are told to make you feel there's a moral to be learnt, some stories are told to suggest that there is no morality. There are lots of reasons why, lots of purpose behind the telling of a tale. And that purpose is also an aspect of the plot. Let's begin with this point. For a story to have meaning and to have purpose, it must have a viable structure. And that's a rather grandiose thing of me to say. But for a story to mean anything, when we hear a story, when somebody tells us a story, when we go and see a play, when we watch a movie or a TV program or whatever, even when we look at a piece of art, be it realistic art, graphic art, be it modern, be it impressionistic, expressionistic, when we look at that piece of art, and I was going to say that canvas, but it could be anything, it must tell its story. We may not get it, we may not understand it, but for it to justify itself as art, it must tell its story. there must be an essential framework upon which the story hangs. And it's very easy. I mean, in terms of visual art, it's very easy when you look at an old master painting, or you look at Rembrandt's The Night Watch or whatever. You know there's a story being told there. Not so easy when you look at later artists sometimes, but nevertheless, it must. If you look at the famous painting Van Gogh did of his bedroom, with the bed and the chair and the window and the thing, and you look at it and you think, well, what's that about? Why paint that? Because it is a story. It is a story of the isolation within which he lived. It is a story of the world which encapsulated his daily life. So that is a plot. A plot is the essential framework upon which a story hangs. And as I say, it must have a viable structure. I guarantee we all have a friend, and maybe we ourselves are guilty of this, who tells meandering narratives, usually at cocktail parties, usually with a few martinis taken, narratives that lead nowhere and have no conclusion. There is nothing so boring as somebody telling you something without purpose, without structure, without a point, and without even a punchline. It's rather like, I remember jokes, but I can't remember the punchline. I remember the punchline, I can't remember the joke. No, everything must, to be a truly viable story, the plot must exist. And what is the plot line? And that is where we come to the magnificent, mysterious seven. We are all, everybody on the planet is capable of inventing stories. Because we all have an imagination. We all have a memory. We all have precedents in our life. We have all existed. I'll dwell on that in a second. We are all capable of inventing stories, but they will inevitably fall into one or more of the basic plot lines, but they will not exist without one of them. It's impossible to tell a story, a true story, without one of those plot themes, without one of those mysterious, magnificent seven. And why? Why is it impossible to tell a story without one of the seven basic plots? Because every story that we tell, all the experiences that we have upon which our stories are based, all that happens to us is part of the experience of being human. There's a thing I say to young actors very often, and it's one of the greatest lessons I learned, and it is this fundamental. You are the sum total of your own experience. Every day you are on this planet, every day that you are alive, you experience life. Stuff happens, to quote a well-known play by David Mamet. And that stuff that happens resides in your memory and in your imagination. So everything that happens to you is part of your story. But so much of what happens to you is also part of other people's stories. And so we have a collective as well as an individual memory, a collective set of impressions. What happened to me may not be exactly what happened to you, but the result may have been pretty close, and the structure behind it may have been almost identical. And as we build up this residue of memory, and as we build on our imaginations, so the storylines, the plot lines begin to materialize. So that when I say to you, well, tell me what happened on that occasion, and you tell me the story of that occasion, it will spark in me and in other listeners kind of an awareness that happened to me, or I remember something very like that, or I've heard that happening to somebody else. It's that similarity which is based on the fact that we are all human and that we all experience the same plots. Being human at the very basic level is exactly the same for all of us. Now, that sounds rather an extreme thing to say, because the world is full of whatever it is, 6 billion people, and they're all different, and we're all unique. We're all individuals, but we're not. We're all human. And at a very basic level, we all have exactly the same needs, exactly the same desires, and exactly the same functions. For instance, we all eat. We all drink. We all reproduce our species. And if you're lucky, you take some pleasure in doing that. We all need to find shelter. We need shelter, and we need to find shelter. And it is exactly the same for all of us. Whether it is a multi-million-dollar condo in Manhattan or London's West End or what have you, or if it's a Salvation Army cot, or if it's some pieces of cardboard underneath a bridge, it's the same need and the same achievement. Some of us achieve it better than others, but the same need is there, the same story is there. We need shelter. We find shelter. We need to reproduce. We find a partner to reproduce with. We need to eat. We find food. We might steal it. We might grow it. We might go down to the supermarket and buy it, but it's the same basic function. I know I'm going on and on about this, but the plots will thicken, I promise you. We all, for instance, go on journeys. Every one of us understands what it is to take a journey. Now, it could be to an exotic destination. It could be on a luxury cruise liner, or it could be a trip to Walmart. But it is the same principle. You decide to go on the journey, you set out on the journey, you take the journey, and you come home from the journey. The principle is the same. It is that basic plot line of I need to go somewhere, I need to come home. The similarity is at the basic level, the 7 basic plots. The word basic is terribly important. We all fight monsters. Every one of us. We do it. Be they real or imaginary, physical or mental. Everyone on this planet fights monsters. And if we didn't, we couldn't understand that storyline. We couldn't understand that concept. You can only understand that which you yourself experience, which you yourself have seen, which is there in your memory, moving around in your imagination. The monster may be the unpleasant person when you park your car who says, that's my space. That can be a monster, and you can do battle with them. It can be somebody who tries to mug you. It can be it doesn't make any difference. It can be a wild animal. It can be a bear. It can be a lion. It doesn't matter. We all fight monsters, and we have the emotional reaction, the disturbance in our chest and in our breathing, the beating of the heart. We all experience that. It is that same basic principle. We are human, is the point. Therefore, we are all human. Therefore, our lives are the same at that basic level. And therefore, we can define the activities, the stories of our lives into these 7 basic categories or plots, if you like. Now, when I say we are all the same, I really do mean that at that very basic level, irrelevant to any other aspect of what we are, where we're from, how we grew up, how we were educated, and anything else. Forget all of that, put it aside, and at that very simple level, we are all the same, human. If that wasn't true, then literature, drama, and as I said, visual art wouldn't actually be possible. If we did not share that common humanity, we could not understand what is being written about, what is being painted. Music's slightly different because it's more mathematical, but the same principle applies to the reason why music is composed. It's part of this particular desire to tell a story. And why do we tell stories? Why do we do it? Because we love it. Everybody tells stories. We all tell stories. How was your work today? Oh, let me tell you what happened. And the story commences. How are you feeling? Oh, well, I'll tell you. Once you get that, I'll tell you. And the story is coming. And the story could be that long or the size of Ulysses. Makes no difference. It is that wish to recount, to share the experience, that what happened to me, I am the sum total of my own experience. But what my experience is, I want to share with you, because you will find that your experiences are very similar. And you'll understand who I am by what I tell you. We want to tell stories to share ourselves. Why do we tell children stories that are not actually true? I mean, when you think about it, when our children are very small, we lie to them constantly. We tell them stories of fairies and goblins and cats with hats and various other things. And it's all lies, but it isn't. From the Brothers Grimm to Hans Christian Andersen, from Beatrix Potter, who convinces us that rabbits can speak, to Dr. Seuss and cats with hats, we tell children stories. Why? Why not just simply say to them, do this, do that, do this, do that? Because they will not understand why. So the stories that we tell them explain humanity, explain why we ask for certain things, why it's not a good idea to do this, why it's a good idea to do that. We tell stories to make it understood. When we are telling stories, we are telling ourselves to other people. And in doing so, we are explaining others to themselves. That's not an easy concept, and I hope you're with me in terms of understanding what I'm saying. But when I tell you a story, even when I do a webinar on any topic, I am in fact telling you something about me. And when I talk a story about King Lear or Hamlet or whatever, I am sharing your humanity with you, because you understand it, because you see those points. You see those points of recognition. So this whole process of storytelling, which is the process of literature, which is the process of drama, is about sharing the commonality of our humanity. So literature, as I say, literature and drama only works as an art form because we see ourselves in others and others see themselves in us. The experience of one is the experience of all, of everybody. And at this level, this basic level, race, sexuality, even education is completely irrelevant. It's just human experience. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter your color. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. None of that matters at this level. We are simply human beings going through the fundamental process of surviving, growing, developing, and dying. Because those are the things we will all do. Any human being can and does live out each and every one of these 7 basic plots during and throughout their lives. I will repeat that. Every human being can and does live out each and every one of the 7 basic plots during and throughout their lives. That's a huge statement to make. How do you know I live out that plot? Because you're human. And you can't be human if you don't. And you can't experience humanity if you don't recognize it. It's not important that you recognize the big picture, but it's terribly important that you understand, if you are going to have satisfactory awareness of yourself, the basic principles these storylines, of these plots, because they are plots because they are human, not in spite of being, not regardless of being, but because we are human, these plots are essential. You might say, I would say, because I'm prone to grandiose statement, but you might say that the basic plots are what it is to be human. So, at this point, I very often will recommend a piece of reading for you. And if you are truly interested in this simple but enormous topic, I do recommend a book. I had this book years ago, those that disappeared down the vast, yawning hole of, oh, can I borrow that? Yeah. And I never see it again. So I got it again recently. The book has a title that might sound familiar, The 7 Basic Plots, Why We Tell Stories, by a man called Christopher Booker. I heartily recommend it to you, should you really, really be interested. But it is this thick, and the typeface is, sorry, I'm not showing that well, remarkably small. But it is a fascinating read. You don't need to read it to understand the principle. If you really want to examine the principles, this is the book to go to, and is my Bible on the topic. If you want to write a play or a novel, don't use that as a basis. Use the principle, the simple principle that I'm trying to lay out to you as your basis for work. Or better still, ignore everything I say and use your own imagination. Anyway, I'm coming to that question again, what are the 7 basic plots? Well, there are different ways to describe them. And if you go back all the way back to the Greeks, the Greek poets and dramatists, they will have probably used different terminology to describe them. But what I love about Booker is that he has put them into a very simple and very understandable set of definitions. So, the 7 basic plots. The first is Voyage and Return, which I'm, for the sake of this particular event, calling There and Back Again, for a reason I'll come to. The second, The Quest, which sort of self-explanatory. It is not the same as Voyage and Return. The Quest is very often involves voyage and return, but for a specific purpose. The third is Rags to Riches, a plot line that everybody can immediately understand because we always envy those who manage to achieve it. The fourth, Overcoming the Monster. And that is something, as I said, everybody overcomes a monster in their lives. The question is, what is the monster? How do we define it? And how do we overcome it? But that principle of overcoming the monster is something we can all recognize. The next is Rebirth. And Rebirth, again, is a fundamental plot line that we can all understand because we have all experienced it. We have all, as human beings, gone through some moment of cathartic change from one condition to another, poverty to relative wealth, hunger to well-being, well-being to hunger. There is a rebirth concept where a fundamental change happens in our own existence. All of these I will be discussing in depth over this occasional series, and we'll pick it up during the course of the rest of the year. The final two I've already discussed at length, so I may not be coming back to them in quite the same way. The final two are tragedy, the fundamental of tragedy, and comedy, the fundamental of comedy. And as I said, we talked about in the past about what tragedy actually is and how it works, and what comedy is and why things are funny, usually because they're tragic. But I will touch on those again later. But as I say, we have discussed those in past webinars, and I don't need to dwell too deeply on it. But over the next while, over the next 3 or 4 months, we will discuss Voyage and Return today, The Quest, Rags to Riches, Overcoming the Monster, and Rebirth, and examine what they actually mean and how you recognize them, how you've been reading these stories and watching these movies for years now, and sometimes not recognizing that it's the same story. So this week, we're looking at Voyage and Return, or as J.R.R. Tolkien put it, There and Back Again, which was the subtitle of The Hobbit. Where from and where to? Where is there and back again to what? Fundamental principle. And Booker describes it, and I agree completely with him, because it is a fundamental of that plot line. That we take a journey from the now to another world, and we encounter stuff, and that encounter with stuff changes us, changes what we are and who we are in some way, and then we come home different, changed, affected by that experience. And that's the Voyage and Return principle, that the character or characters go on a journey that may not have been of their own choice, have experiences that actually cause change in them, and then return back better or worse or whatever. For instance, we experienced one a week ago with James Joyce's remarkable novel, Ulysses. I'll mention that again in a minute. So let's talk about that. You go from now to another world. What is the now, and what is the nature of the other world? How do you get there? What do you find there? How do you deal with it? How do you return? And what have you learned, or how have you changed? Because for that structure of Voyage and Return to exist, it must have that completion. It's like the completion of the circle. You start here, you travel there, you come back to here, but you're different. If you're not different, you haven't learned. So the journey had no point and meaning. There must be change to occur. And we all do that, no matter how short the journey is. Even if the journey is, as I say, down to Walmart and you come back with your groceries, it means you can now eat, whereas when you went, you couldn't. Something has occurred on that journey to change you. And we start with that particular storyline when we're very young. A lot of the stories that we tell children are that particular plot line, that basic plot. The journey and return, the voyage and return. Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll is a perfect example of it. Alice is sitting in the garden under a tree and sees a rabbit and follows it. She starts on a journey. Why does she leave where she is? Because she sees something that prompts her to follow. She falls down the rabbit hole and goes into another place, another world, a different world. A world where the rules are different, where behavior is different. And she faces challenges. She wants to go through a door into a garden, but she's too big. She finds something that says, eat me, and she gets very small. But now she can't reach the key of the door, so she finds something that says, drink me, and she drinks it, and now she can reach it, and on and on and on until she gets through. This is extraordinary experience and learning experience. Learning the challenge of how to solve the problem of the key in the door. And this doesn't happen in the now place, it happens in the other place, the place where you are starting on a journey of discovery. She walks through a garden. She sees very strange creatures. She walks through a forest. She meets very, very strange creatures. She has to deal with a complex problem, the Queen. And the Queen wants everybody's head off. She has to face the challenge of the Queen. And by facing the challenge of the Queen, and winning, she can return from the other to the now, but with a lot more of gained knowledge, understanding, and experience. In other words, that journey has been a learning journey, a learning curve that brings her back a little wiser than she was when she left. It's a very simple example. There's an even simpler example of that. And most of our nursery rhymes that and nursery stories that we teach our children follow exactly that same principle. Goldilocks. Everybody knows the story of Goldilocks. Goldilocks tripping through the woods, happy as the day is long, and arrives from the now place to the other place. And the other place, because she's hungry and tired, and she sees a cottage, she sees a house or whatever, and she goes in, and she sees chairs, and so she has to make a selection as where is she going to be comfortable, and she chooses the chair that makes her comfortable. And then she sees 3 bowls of porridge, and she must make a choice because one is too hot, one is too cold, but one of them is just right, so that she can now eat. And then she's sleepy, so she wants to lie down. But now she has another choice to make because there are 3 beds. One is too lumpy, one is too soft, but one is just right. So she makes all of these choices. She learns the process of selection. Then comes the problem. The 3 bears. Who's been sitting in my chair? Who's been eating my porridge? Who's lying in my bed? And she must escape. She must escape the threat by her own guile and get out of the other place and back to the now place. It's exactly the same story of learning, of going to another place, learning a lesson and returning. The most famous, perhaps, of that notion of the journey. A journey, don't forget that you don't necessarily cause yourself, that may be brought upon you. And one of the most famous of that is, of course, The Wizard of Oz. There's Dorothy, wishing for somewhere wonderful to live, somewhere over the rainbow. And then the tornado comes, and the house is ripped up, and there she is, plonk, suddenly going from sepia tone to technicolor, in the land of Oz, in the other place. Escaping to what she dreamed of, somewhere over the rainbow. And there, and this is why I say it is exactly that same basic plot. Learning. She learns, she has 3 lessons to learn. She has to learn the nature of wisdom. She has to learn the nature of love. And she has to learn how to be brave. In other words, a brain, a heart, and courage. These are the 3 lessons she needs to learn, because when the major challenge occurs, it is the 3 of those things that will matter most. She learns them through the mechanism of the companions, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion. But when the challenge comes, having gone on this journey and met the wizard, who gives her yet another challenge, in other words, who tests her resolve by saying, bring me the witch's broomstick. That is an enormous aspect, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's an expression of how the human condition changes through this mechanism of learning. She vanquishes the witch by using the 3 gifts that she seeks, by learning the reality of those gifts of wisdom, of love, of care for her companions, of thinking, using her wits, her brains, and of courage, of having the courage to face the witch and throw the bucket of water, which is actually an accident, and the witch melts away. When she returns to the wizard, she learns an even greater lesson, that those gifts she already had, she just didn't know. She already had wisdom, she already had love, she already had courage. and all that the lesson has taught her was not how to gain them, but how to use them. And she returns home wiser and more content. No longer does she want to travel over the rainbow, because there's no place like home when you feel confident that you're wise enough and loving enough and brave enough to deal with it. So it's the same. To say that Goldilocks and Wizard of Oz are the same story may seem like a stretch of the imagination, but it's true. Speaking of wizards, The Hobbit, which began the whole Lord of the Rings adventure and was subtitled There and Back Again, which I'm referring to, is exactly that same thing. It is the voyage and the return. The Hobbit is being led to a new world. Remember, the Hobbit lives in Hobbiton, never goes anywhere. Hobbits never leave the village. They never go anywhere. They're not interested in the rest of the world. That's one of the joys of being a Hobbit. You can walk around your own village barefoot and not tread on thumbtacks. But the Hobbit is led to a new world by a wizard who says, I need your help. We need your specific skills. What skills? We need a burglar. I'm not a burglar. Yes, you are now. And the wizard will teach him what that actually means. So the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, joins an adventure which is not of his own making. It wasn't a choice, I'm going to go off on an adventure. That was the last thing he wanted. But he is persuaded and cajoled to take that journey, to go on that voyage of discovery by an outside influence. And he enters into a journey in which he will discover that he has wisdom, that he has an inner strength that he did not know or understand within himself, because it was never tested against the outside world. It is exactly that same thematic as Dorothy goes through in the Land of Oz. Bilbo Baggins discovers that he has the skills of a sneak, that he can steal things if he has to for the good of all, that he has the courage to face danger, and that when he returns home, he is wiser. But unlike Dorothy, he has a new sense of wanderlust. He has discovered that there is a world beyond the village, beyond his normal life. The change that occurs to Bilbo Baggins, and if it didn't, then we wouldn't have the Lord of the Rings, but the change that occurs to Bilbo Baggins is the discovery that within himself are desires greater than he ever understood. That aside, it is still the Wizard of Oz, and it's still Goldilocks, and it's still Alice in Wonderland. So these stories, these plots work because they are the cycle that we all go through and that we've all been through at some level, in some way or other. Some aspect of ourselves has experienced exactly this voyage and return. And I'm not going to enumerate them all. It's happened to me 1,000 times. It's probably happened to you 1,000 times. But when you think about it, you are Bilbo Baggins, and you are Alice in Wonderland, and you are Goldilocks. Well, I'm not anymore, but I used to be. Let's take another example of a more adult tale, Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe goes from the now to the other world. And the other world is by no choice of his own. He is shipwrecked, marooned on a desert island. And he has to go in that process. That is a voyage not merely to the island, but a voyage of self-discovery and realization of the self. He must discover self-sufficiency. He is a man used to being served who must now serve himself. He is a man who has to fend for himself, feed himself, fish for himself, farm for himself, look after himself. He is alone on an island with no possibility of discovery. So he has to turn this new world, this other place, into literally his new environment. But he also discovers that he is not alone, that there are others, and one of those others is a man he finds on a Friday, which is what he calls him. he discovers companionship. Now, it is very arguable, because the book was written an awfully long time ago, that the relationship between Crusoe and Friday is one of master and servant. But nevertheless, in a world in which he has discovered self-sufficiency and his own individuality, he is now faced with rediscovering companionship and dependence, and working together with somebody else to vanquish an enemy, the pirates and things on the other part of the island. And having made that discovery, having discovered those skills, those, I will say, social skills, they're not particularly social, but you understand what I mean, he can now return home as a much more developed person. It's the same story. In theatre, Shakespeare, The Tempest. Here we have someone being banished to an island with only his child. There you are. You are the Duke of Milan, or Milan, if you follow the pentameter correctly, and you and your little child are dumped on an island, and the only thing you have with you is your book of spells. You brought with you your wisdom. You brought with you your knowledge, but nothing else. So what must you do? You must discover the extent of your powers over nature, both human nature and spiritual nature. Your powers over human nature, which is to turn Caliban, the local, as it were, into a submissive servant. Your powers over spiritual nature, the spirit, Ariel, must be controlled. You have in that environment, in that other place, to discover your own potential and the powers you can have. Because your enemies will turn up. The people who banished you will suddenly arrive. And you have an opportunity now to punish them. But also to marry your daughter off to the son of one of them. Side point. Small side plot. But you have this opportunity you've discovered now because of the power in this other place, when you begin to realize the enormity of your ability to control nature, to control supernature. You find forgiveness. You find the capacity to forgive those enemies. And you return home again with a greater sense of human compassion. You drown your book. You break your staff. The game is over. You have learned, you have discovered, and you are now a better person because of it. It is the same journey. You can, even if you were to look, and it's a much more complex level on which I'm talking here, but Eugene O'Neill wrote a play with that word in it, A Long Day's Journey into Night, a journey of discovery that is set upon because, not by your own will, but that's the way nature works. After dawn comes noon, after noon comes afternoon, afternoon comes evening, and after evening comes night. And it is a journey we all undertake. But through the journey of this one day, the protagonists, all of them, will make discoveries. They will go from the security of waking in the morning to the fear of what the night may bring. And they travel through that journey, making discoveries about themselves and about each other. Now, I'm not going to go in depth. In fact, one of these days, I'm going to actually do a couple of webinars on that play, because I do think it's one of the greatest things ever written, but not for today. But that notion of going from home, the safe space, to another place and returning home again is existent within that play just as much as it is in any of the others that I've mentioned. And there are legions of plays. The important point, I suppose, of the webinar, the reason I'm actually putting this out there for you, is to say, when you look at a play, can you see that in it? When you look at events in your own life, can you recognize that voyage and return aspect? Because the more you can recognize it within yourself, the more you will recognize it within a book or a play. When you read a book and you watch a play, I understand, I get that. You know it because you've taken that same voyage and return. Sorry, I'm just checking I'll get some more. The journey that is provided by the Voyage and Return plot can actually teach us that where we find ourselves may not be our intention. And each of the stories I've mentioned, some of them, like, for instance, The Hobbit, and I'll come to Lord of the Rings again as an example in a later webinar. But The Hobbit is a perfect example of we had no intention of ending up here. The journey we take may not be the journey we take may not be of our own desire. The route we take may not be the one we planned. But nevertheless, once you have gone from home, the safe spot, to the other place, that other place, even the destination may not be what you expected or hoped for. We cannot control, because we are human, we are not in control. Life is in control. And life, as most of us have discovered, loves playing its little jokes. Life will always kick up the unexpected. So one of the joys, I suppose, of the dramatic structure, one of the things that makes it such fun to watch or so horrific to watch, is that it never fulfills exactly the expectations we set upon it. Nobody embarking on it, you embark on a journey and you get on the flight and you suddenly discover that you're 3,500 miles in the other direction because you got on the wrong plane, or somebody hijacked the plane, or the pilot's drunk, whatever. But life has a wonderful way of taking us on that voyage to an unexpected place. That voyage can lead us to unexpected conclusions, and that voyage can teach us unexpected discoveries. So the principle of voyage and discovery, there and back again, is not absolute. It is subject to the human condition. It is subject to nature. It is subject to unexpected circumstance. But it's still that same fundamental, basic journey. Where we find ourselves, and when I say we, I'm talking about characters in plays, characters in novels, and you and me. Where we find ourselves, that place very often presents us with problems and challenges we are not prepared for, on that basis of life having its little joke. The purpose of the journey, and that's true of the human condition, and I keep coming back to that, it's of the human condition. The purpose of the journey is to teach us, not necessarily what we want to learn, but very often what we need to learn. And it happens in life, and therefore it happens in the stories we tell. And we will tell stories to teach the young the way life works, and to teach ourselves how other people work. And if we can understand how we ourselves work, how we ourselves react at any given circumstance, we have a better possibility of understanding how that happens to other people, regardless of race, sexuality, or anything else. We are human, and we all experience the same. We all experience those same desires for shelter, for food, for drink, for procreation, all the fundamentals of the human condition. Life may not teach us the way we want to learn it, but it will teach us the way we need to learn it. And it will also teach us that with wit and guile and an understanding and determination, that we can overcome these little difficulties. Because that's the way it works in the human condition. If you're hungry, your wit and your determination will find something to eat. You will eat 25 mushrooms, most of which will make you vomit, but you'll find the one that will sustain you, unless, of course, you're dead before that. This voyage is a voyage of discovery. And I use those three particular wit, guile, determination. We must use those aspects of ourselves to survive. And every time you read or watch a play or read a book that is based on that simple plot line, that's what you should watch out for. How, as the journey progresses, as the voyage comes to the other place, how does the hero or heroine or heroes or heroines, how do they survive and develop and grow? Usually wit, guile, and determination. Because once we have done that, once we have overcome the difficulties that the other place has produced and learned from that, we can return to our own world, to the now, stronger, wiser, and better. And that is the basic plot of Voyage and Discovery. So, if you have any questions to ask, please ask them. And as usual, if you haven't got time to do it now, send an email. I will always respond to it. Is Eugene O'Neill on the horizon for Pict? I'd love to see it. Oh, yes, but the horizon is a bit distant at the moment. As we're all coming back out of the COVID lockdown, we're all being very careful, and we have to be, because funding is not as complete as we might wish it. And a lot of the people who funded us went through their own difficulties through COVID. So I would love to do an O'Neill. If I did do an O'Neill, that's the one I would love to do. That or Morning After Optimism. But not Morning After Optimism. The Moon for the Misbegotten. Morning After Optimism is by Tom Murphy, an Irish playwright. I'm losing my mind. But I would love to do an O'Neill. Yes, absolutely. But it might be a year or so before we can get there. If you have any other questions about this, please ask now or send an email. I'd be delighted to respond. I'd love to know if you're finding this particular topic interesting, because we have at least 4 more to go through. The mysterious, as I say, we've talked about tragedy and comedy, and I will talk about them. But the other 4, which I'll be addressing over the next few months, which is Overcoming the Monster, Rags to Riches, The Quest, and Rebirth. And I want to look at that in various storylines and plays, and try to examine. I suppose the purpose of this series is, let's have a look at why we look at plays rather than just looking at plays. However, next week, I'm going to bring us back to some Shakespeare. I'll be announcing it online over the next couple of days, because I'm still working out what the sequence will be. But we'll be back with Shakespeare again next week. In the meantime, that's all for today. If you can, please consider sending a donation. As we what about Morning Becomes Electra? Our plots readily mixed or do stories? No, actually, Ken, you have a very good question there. And the answer to that one is, you can have a multitude of basic plots in the same story. What I'm trying to do is isolate each of what those plots are. But for instance, I mentioned Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings contains all 7 of the basic plots. Most of Shakespeare will contain 3 or 4 of those basic plot lines. I'm not suggesting for a moment that each story is only one plot line. What I'm saying is, each of those plot lines is identifiable and is repeated again and again and again in a multitude of forms. And the plot lines that you read when you read fairy stories as a child are the same plot lines that you experience when you watch deep and complex plays like the plays of O'Neill. So what was I saying? Yes, please do consider a donation. Please do sign up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's completely free. Remember that every webinar we've done is on the YouTube channel, including this year's Ulysses. Please encourage your friends as well. Tell your friends, if you're interested in theatre, if you're interested in listening to me drone on about theatre, tell your friends about it. They might be interested too. The word is spread the word. Consider it a voyage and return, that you are voyaging out into the world to spread the word, and when you come back home again, you'll feel a lot better for it. In the meantime, have a lovely week. I will see you all in a week's time. Bless you all.